In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. Tonight, I'd like to start the show where I will do a Black History reflection before we introduce our guests. Our reflection tonight is on Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall's legacy is a reminder that justice is not an abstract ideal, it is a lived experience shaped by courage, intellect, and relentless advocacy. Before he became the first Black Supreme Court justice, Marshall was a strategist, a litigator, and a visionary who understood that the law could be both a weapon and a shield. His work with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund dismantled the legal architecture of segregation, culminating in Brown v. Board of Education, a decision that redefined the moral compass of this nation. Marshall believed deeply in the transformative power of education, not simply as a pathway to opportunity, but as a fundamental right tied to dignity and citizenship. Tonight, as we welcome Dr. Deshaun C. Washington, we honor Marshall's blueprint using knowledge as liberation, policy as empowerment, and education as the cornerstone of a just society. Dr. Washington's work stands firmly in that lineage as a continuation of Marshall's insistence that every child deserves access, equity, and the tools to shape their own destiny. Thank you for that, ladies and gentlemen. And now I'd like to introduce our wonderful guests. So, again, good evening, family. Welcome to another powerful episode of America in Black and White, where truth meets testimony and where our stories are not just told, they are honored. Tonight, we explore the intersection of education, justice, and community transformation. We live in a time when public education is under pressure, teachers are stretched thin, and opportunity gaps continue to widen. Yet, in the midst of these challenges, there are leaders who refuse to let our system define our children's futures, leaders who innovate, advocate, and elevate. Our guest tonight is one of those leaders. Dr. Deshaun C. Washington is not just an educator, he is a movement. A 2024 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year, a two-time TEDx speaker, a scholar, a curriculum developer, a public education advocate, and a builder of pathways that empower students to thrive academically, socially, and civically. Tonight, we dive into his journey, his purpose, and the work he is doing to cultivate change makers across the nation. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Deshaun Washington. Hello,
Hey,
sir.
Brother King, how you doing tonight, man?
I am doing just excellent. I know it's been like 6+ months when we scheduled this wonderful show, and I'm really glad that you're here. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we get into the show?
Well, when you introduced tonight's Black History icon that we could focus on, it really brought me full circle because a lot of people don't know this. So I think it's good to share it. My first Black History project in elementary school was of the Honorable Thurgood Marshall. And I had a chance to study him in great depths. And one of the things I studied about was his time at Harvard University and his training that he had under Charles Hamilton Houston and learning the law and understanding the law and putting it into action. And he was a scholar by nature. and applied so much of his knowledge into practical application. And I think, in this full circle moment, I think tonight is like a perfect opportunity for us to examine the practical application behind all of the theory, all the things that we learn about. But how do we put that into practice to ensure that our kids and our people are getting the best opportunities for learning, the best opportunities for engagement to make impact in society? And so I'm grateful for tonight, Brother King, because the Honorable Thurgood Marshall was just one of my favorite historical figures growing up, and just to hear that tonight is rejuvenating.
Well, what I like to do is, as we get the show started, what I like to do is I like to go through it, get an opportunity to where I have our audience get the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you, the man that you were before you got to this point. So, can you tell us what early experiences shaped your love for education and learning?
Oh, for sure. This you talk about the fun stuff right here. So I would say my introduction to education started as early as 2 years old. My grandmother, who was an educator in Woburn Public Schools in Massachusetts, she was my first teacher. And every day I would be at her house, staying over. Every day she'll bring me over to the Boston Public Library. We'll take that little walk down Dudley Station all the way up to the Roxbury Public Library in Boston. And man, that's where we would do all of our amazing work. I'm talking about we would read books for hours on end. And, we would learn all these different concepts from nonfiction texts and from the stories like Big Red Clifford and Frog and Toad and all these books. And I remember how much grandma would showcase her expression. She would read with expression as she would go through the books, right? And, it made me really invested into the characters and make predictions about what the characters would do next. And I had so much fun learning from grandma how to read, and listening to her read out to me that it became one of my greatest joys, even to this day, is books and reading. So that was my earliest introduction, was grandma's daily interaction with me centering around books. And I would say that at 2, 3 years old, she unlocked my brain to imagining. What I think about imagination these days is the ability to create, to innovate, to be inspired, to do something new, to make the world a better place. And I remember that. I remember just those books being able to be the creative opportunity for me to look at the world in a new way, where it was so big yet such reachable, because the power of the book was in my hand. And so I had this nice interaction of books is a connector for me, and also the books are also a element of opportunity for me. And grandma gave me that initial exposure to my imagination and creating and innovating something new. And it really just comes from just reading cool, awesome children's books. That's really how it all started. And that was my earliest introduction to education. And then it really just going on from there.
Mhm. So, who were the educators or mentors who first saw your potential?
Mm. Yeah, I would say that probably my fourth and fifth grade teacher, Mr. McLean. He was, at my elementary school. I went to Boston Public Schools, and for my elementary years, Mr. McLean, he was someone that was, he held me accountable to expand myself as a student. I would say that generally school was relatively easier for me, in large part because I already had a lot of the foundation skills of reading from a very young age. So engaging in school was not as hard as maybe for someone else. But at the cost of that was that I didn't always apply myself the best way. I kind of coasted. And I remember Mr. McLean, spent a lot of time with me to really emphasize the importance in fourth grade, fifth grade of get into that next level as a student where you're taking ownership of your learning. You're not a passive receiver of learning, but you're the active participant of learning. And having him for those 2 years and having a male teacher at that was such a unique experience for me. Up to that point, all my teachers were women up to that point. So having him as a male teacher, it made me start to see myself as a male myself. Like teaching is also for men as well. Like I was so used to seeing women all the time. So like, oh, I didn't know men also did this work. So that was like my first exposure to that. And yeah, I think he was just someone who was very fair, kind, respectful. Also, like he'll hold you accountable. Hold you to a high level of responsibility, but came with guidance. And that was the first like educator I would say for me that elevated me to another level, shifted me from the earliest of education, passively receiving it, to now actively seeking out education and knowledge.
So, I'll tell you, all of the male educators that have been here on the show, I got to say, all of you guys are just doing it. And I am so proud to see that, because what it does is the impact may not be is very large, but because the number of you guys are so small that a lot of people really don't see it the way they should see it. Can you tell us, from having that male teacher in your early life, how did that impact your leadership in the classroom today?
Wow. Well, that's a really great question because there's different stages and levels to the impact it has led to me to being an educator today. So yeah, I had the Mr. McLean's, and I had the Mr. Forbes, and I had these other teachers throughout my K to 12 experience that kind of showcased what the final product was going to look like when it was all said and done. Then there's also this element of once you become a teacher, you have to learn how to be an effective teacher. So, I'll go through college, and I become educator. I graduated at UMass Boston. Shout out to the Beacons with elementary and special education licensure. And I start my first teaching job at one of the Boston public schools in Mattapan, another neighborhood in Boston. And I'll tell you, man, I struggled a lot. So much so that in the beginning months, like I was losing control of my class because I didn't know how to build relationships. I knew how to teach because I was taught in school how to teach. I was taught, how to look at curriculum. I was taught how to provide instruction for curriculum. I was taught how to, do the different strategies and all these different things well. I didn't understand relationships and routines and structures that's needed for effective teaching. So I didn't have those skills. They were very much underdeveloped. And the first few months, I was losing control of my first third grade class. I'm an elementary school teacher. I teach, third grade, fourth grade. Been doing that for a decade plus now. But in the beginning, I struggled significantly with that. And I had some Black male educators specifically. I was very lucky. I had three Black male principals at my school. And you don't get stuff like that. That's not a common phenomenon. That's something that's very rare. Those brothers helped and provided like a crash course in the midst of my first year when I had my class taken over because I could not manage the class. They gave me tools of how to develop things like morning meeting, morning greetings, activity games, scholar of the day, but then also how to elevate student voices, how to pull yourself back as a teacher to allow students to shine. And then how do you allow your voice to now be a facilitator of knowledge rather than the beholder of all knowledge that's from within? And these shifts and paradigms, like at a different level, now allow me to understand how the Mr. McLean's and the Mr. Forbes were so effective earlier in my career when I was a student. And now as a teacher, I got the practical application of that. So that's really what this work of teaching and learning is all about, is you surround yourself, or you're blessed to be around educators, predominantly for me, other Black men who are strong, who are supportive, but also who have the capacity to be able to teach you and elevate you up. So that way you can be effective in your own craft If I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be sitting there talking to you right now and I'd probably be in a different field somewhere. But those brothers helped me to get to the next level. And yeah, I think go from ineffective to effective relatively quickly.
So, growing up, what does
Mhm.
school represent for you personally?
Just something that you did from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock for the most part. Like I said to you earlier, school, and especially in the early years, was passive. I think even after Mr. McLean's fourth and fifth grade class, I felt back to those habits again in middle school. I was just passively skating by. Yeah, I'll get A's, yeah, I'll get B's, but I wasn't applying myself well enough. Like I think the environment in that fourth, fifth grade class helped me to go to another level, but it wasn't internalized. It was like extrinsic motivation that came from the environment that made me perform better. But once you remove me out of the environment, I didn't perform as well. I was still smart, still was reading all these different things, but they were routine. So I wasn't doing well necessarily. Like at that point of like a scholar, he's about to blow up, he's about to do his thing. I wasn't one of those cats. It wasn't until I got to high school I went to City on the Hill charter public school, the original one that's over at 58 Circuit Street in Roxbury, Mass. It's now closed now, but when I went, City on the Hill charter school, that was the prize charter school that you wanted to be at because you knew 100% of the students was graduating from high school going into college. You also knew that they were going to have high level success rate in MCAS, which is like the state assessment. And you knew kids were going to walk out of there much more profound scholars. And there was a lot of undeveloped skills I didn't have that helped me to become like more effective and more um, domineering, I think, as a student in my high school years. I didn't have strong executive functioning skills. I wasn't organized. Time management, while I understood time and I understood management, time plus management didn't equal time management for me. So I would kind of lazily get through activities at the last minute. They taught me how to be organized. They gave me, an assignment notebook, which like to this day I still carry with me. I still carry an assignment notebook to organize all of my duties. They taught me about the importance of elevating my voice. I'm relatively a quiet, introverted person that's reserved to self. I could be a little more boisterous when I'm around people, but generally I like to kind of be on the low. They really helped me to initiate my voice by doing all these town meetings and presentations. I hated all these things. They taught me these skills. They also, at City on the Hill, taught me the importance of internalizing the skills I learned in fourth and fifth grade, being the beholder of my education experience. In fourth grade, fifth grade, like I mentioned before, it's really external. It became internal in high school where I began to have a desire where like I really enjoyed learning again. And I didn't enjoy it for a while. I just was doing it, but I wasn't enjoying it. High school taught me about how to bring joy into learning. And that was like really the key for me as a student growing up, watching teachers like my favorite Miss Ashraf, who taught chemistry, Mr. Dawson, that taught US history and taught AP government politics, Miss Barry teaching me AP calculus, Miss Pratt teaching me, civics. Like these educators gave the platform for me to to be myself while also becoming a owner, a stakeholder of my own learning. And it was at City on Hill, I learned about this phrase that you are the CEO of your learning. And it's something I always use now with my students. Like you are the CEO of your learning. You are the chief executive officer. It starts and ends with you. And this is your first real investments in learning. I didn't know that till I was like 15, 16 years old, going through high school. I try to share that now with young folks, much younger than I was when they get that introduction, because school is very important. It is the quintessential element to get you prepared for engagement as in civic engagement as an informed citizen, a critical consumer of knowledge out in the world. And we need to have that understanding early in the game so we know what our skills are and we can effectively improve our skills moving forward as well. So I guess to answer your question, it took a while for me to really identify schooling as that space for me where I could really excel. But it was the intrinsic understanding in high school that I am the owner of learning that shifted me from now carrying that forward even to this day in time.
So, when did you first realize you wanted to become a teacher?
Well, I had I've had some interesting relationships with becoming a teacher. I would say very early in life, because my grandma taught me how to read. I was always admired by this element of teaching or helping people to be able to read as well. So that was always a turn on all throughout my life. But I would say that I kind of wavered up and down through the years of schooling. Part of this because my own immaturity, part of it because I was interested in other topics like being a lawyer, being a business person, things like that. I would say that really the first time that really resonated with me that teaching is something that I can really start to really focus on was in high school. I used to run like a tutoring block every single day after school at City on the Hill, where we would meet up, from like 3 to like 5:30. And I'll meet up with students and I'll support them with their homework, walk through different math problems, reading assignments, things like that. Really enjoyed that. And students actually would come to these tutoring sessions, which was made even fun. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is really fun. The second, and I think the most influential thing that I normally talk about with people though, is my experience in college with an AmeriCorps program called Jumpstart.
Mhm.
Now, Jumpstart back in 2009, when I was a freshman in college, was servicing 3 to 5 year old children how to read. And if you remember, grandma at 2, 3 years old taught me how to read.
Mhm.
So we talk about full circle moments. This was a full circle moment. I was able to teach young children the direct, explicit instruction of literacy, phonics, phonemic awareness, rhyming awareness, letter sounds, blending, decoding, all these different things. I was teaching and working with young children at that age range how to be a lifelong reader. And I loved this so much. I'm like, man, this is what I have to do is to become a teacher. I got to do this now. But when you're 18 and 19, Brother King, you're impressionable and you can fall gullible to the surrounding environment.
Mhm.
So the environment was like, well, why would you want to become a teacher, man? You can, use your math skills to be an accountant, do finance, do something like that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That makes sense. Why would I go be a teacher and not make a whole lot of money when I could make a whole lot of money running a business or being part of an accounting firm or something like that? So I was swayed again away from teaching, and this time focus my duty specifically on um, accounting and finance, and started to work at a Big Four accounting firm after I graduated with my undergrad in 2013 with an accounting finance degree, and I worked there for a few years, and I didn't like it. I didn't like getting up at 5 in the morning, getting to work at 7 a.m. and working until 11 p.m. every single day during busy season, losing summers, losing winters, doing taxes for people that I never will meet, for groups of people that was never interacting with. I felt that disconnection and it got me to a really low state about what my call of action is. And another program called Junior Achievement,
Yeah.
which teaches all about financial literacy to young folks,
Mhm.
resurface what my calling is to teach. From there, I dropped my work over at the accounting firm, went back to UMass Boston, get the elementary secondary education, started teaching, and been in education ever since. It's the greatest profession in the world. And no one could really tell me a job is better than teaching. You get to make a monumental impact to generations worth of people. And I think that is probably the most joyful, most fun part of it all is that work right there. So yeah, I would say all of that has been really impactful to the ebbs and flows, the waves of flirting with teaching, but never committing to the relationship with teaching until was in rock bottom and really had to find myself to know this is the calling that God had for me to do from the very beginning. It was now time for me to act on
So, how did your upbringing influence your approach to leadership and advocacy?
it. I think the early years I had a chance to see people like my mother, for example, be a strong advocate for me in terms of the type of school I was going to go to and the type of education I was going to receive. I had a great vision of that very early and often from her as part of my educational experience. I also had a chance to see in my own schooling experience teachers vouching for me in terms of giving me access to courses like honors and AP courses, which otherwise didn't have those access to. I was able to get those access because of teacher support. Notice the language I'm using is that either I was a passive bystander or someone else did for me. So it took a long time, I think, for me to find my voice. I would say I probably didn't find my voice until I went to Vanderbilt University for my doctoral degree. I'll be dead honest with you.
Mhm.
Up to that point, yeah, I had a voice. I'm using it right now as we speak. Um, like I was able to be like influential and able to be motivating to young folks and to older folks and things like that. But when we talk about things like advocacy, when we talk about things like justice, equity, things like that, I would say I either was underdeveloped, so I shied away from it, or again, going back to old habits, a passive observer of these moments where I should have said something, but I stayed back and I watched. And when I went to Vanderbilt University in 2022, it was the first place that I would say that now, as a mature 30-year-old student who's now found what his purpose is in life, now is starting to find his voice, I was able to practice my voice there. I was able to try different things, be around a strong cohort of principals, superintendents, educational leaders of all different types to be able to guide me and direct me of like how to be more effective with my voice. Professors who cared about my growth and development, supporting me in developing that skill of being an advocate, not being afraid of the moment, but rising to the moment. It was always in me, but the difference was that I didn't activate that. In part because I didn't seek opportunities to activate it, and other times the opportunities came, I passed on it. Vanderbilt University gave the platform for me to practice all the things I saw my mom do, all the things my teachers have done for me. I had a chance to practice. And that 3 years of practicing turned out to be like very effective for me when I walked away and graduated last May. That was like the moment where it all really just came together for me as an advocate. And now like I lean into advocacy, Brother King, in a way that I think about what our needs of our students are. I think about what's going on in this world when it comes to reading, when it comes to financial literacy, when it comes to all of these elements of schooling and what the schooling experience is. Something has to be done. And I'm put on earth to help make forward these concerns where we have 100% of our young children reading. We have 100% of our children being financially fluent. Where we have kids and we have, young adults who can make wise decisions because they are sound academically and sound streets sound. All of those things are literacy. When you do the street smarts, there's a literacy component for being in the streets and having street smarts in the streets. That's literacy. And it's also literacy to pick up a book and read and to write and to speak and to listen. That's literacy. And combining all that, like that fire got put in me, and now we're letting that thing go wherever it needs to in order to make sure all of our children have what they need. So Vanderbilt University, thank you, because that was the place where practice was able to become progress.
So when you think about your time at Vanderbilt, you
Mhm.
working on your PhD. What was the one thing that stood out most to you that you got from being around so many other great people like yourself?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I got out was that Vanderbilt's in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a Boston kid by nature. So I'm from Boston, Mass. And, when it was time to go to my doctorate program, it just made sense to me that I would look for something in the Boston area, Harvard, something like that. And I stumbled upon Vanderbilt University. I saw like a little, like literally like a stumble upon app. And I clicked on the link and it brought me to Vanderbilt University. And I watched this video and I was just drawn by the video of these students literally flying in from wherever they came from, run into class after they got out of the airport, have their notes, all these different things, their readings, talking about it, debating it, professors, having these conversations with students. And I'm like, oh, that's a place I want to go to,
Right,
something like that.
right.
So I would say Vanderbilt's biggest benefit for me or biggest support for me was that one, it took me out of the confines of Boston. It brought me to another part of the country, another part of culture that's totally different from Boston. Nashville and Boston ain't the same at all. So these are different vibes, different environments you're going to. I'm from, in Boston, you don't say what's up to people. You say what's up
Right,
to people, that's a problem.
right,
And Nashville, you have small conversations with people. Y'all talk, the hospitality is there, and it's like you learn these cultural things. But then also, I'm now going to school and the lens is not about Boston or Massachusetts. It's about education.
uh,
Because now I'm going to school, I'm talking with people from Illinois, I'm talking to people from Indiana, I'm talking to people from New York and New Jersey, California, and from Alabama and all these different places, and from Tennessee and all these different places. We're all coming together for these cohort weekends. I'm learning about education in ways that I would have never been exposed to before because different states have different things going on with education. We might all have a similar story, but the law and legislation and how legislation may be able to say one thing in one state and everyone has to follow, but then in another state you try to do that and there might be 300 different districts that might say we're going to do it this way. So you're learning the complexities of education, yet learning that the same goal for everybody is there. That at the age of 18, we want to make sure that our young children are able to be lifelong readers, lifelong writers, be literate, be able to be upstanding citizens in society, civically engaged, informed consumers of knowledge. All these things was like kind of a universal understanding. How we got there was the wrestling question. I spent 3 years wrestling at Vanderbilt University. I would say I couldn't get that anywhere else because I don't know if I would have had all these people from all these different places coming to one spot. And more importantly, for me personally, to leave out of the nest and to go
mm,
fly somewhere else, literally on a plane every weekend to Nashville, taught me a lot about who I am and some of my cultural values that I now take into heart today, because now Nashville is a second home, Vanderbilt's a second home. Love Vanderbilt, and that experience to find myself literally in my voice and my leadership and my command and authority as an educator. That I don't know if happens the same way if I stayed home. I had to go. I had to go away and go do that.
Well, let's transition over to your work as an educator.
Yeah.
Um, so, what philosophy guided your 9 years as an elementary school teacher?
Repeat the question one more time. I'm sorry.
What philosophy guided your 9 years as an elementary school teacher?
Well, there's a couple of philosophies, and I didn't know these philosophies until much later. But the philosophy that I think I can really share with the listening audience and the viewing audience tonight of how I approach teaching and learning is the crazy framework. I mentioned to you all before that my first year was not a good year. I was dealing with crazy situations and I didn't know how to handle them. And I needed guidance on how to handle them. As a teacher, I learned through the mentoring and development of other Black male educators and other teachers who cared about me being effective about this crazy framework. And I'll walk you through what the crazy framework is and tell you what they all mean and how that impacts my philosophy as a teacher. So the letter C, in crazy stands for cultivating connections. Before anything happens in the classroom, it's so important for teachers to be able to know their students. When I say know their students, not just like knowing their name. Like you get to walk in a path with them for an entire year. And during the course of that year, you're sharing a story together. So successes and wins, you get to celebrate together. Losses and defeats, you get to mourn about them. And everything in the in between, you get to experience. I get a chance to write a page out of those children's books every year. And those pages just my preparation for them to get ready for their calling and service in life. I have to cultivate those connections because I need to know who you are, your interests. I need to know like what you're called to be, what your talents are, what your gifts are that God gave you. And then how do I help to cultivate those things in the year that I get to serve with you? R is respect and routines. We cultivate a community of respect where we all are one. I am because we are, that Ubuntu kind of statement. I am because we are. We are together as one because we have this opportunity where we're learning from each other, we're learning with each other, and none of us are better than one another. We just are utilizing all of our gifts to make the best versions of ourselves. And in the midst of that, we establish routines of how to get up out of our seats, how to walk to the rug space, how to engage in popcorn style discussions where kids can shout out answers, but listening to each other and bouncing off ideas from each other. So critical. The A stands for activating student voice. So we talked earlier that I did a lot of this in my first year teaching, talked a lot. But in fact, my goal now is to elevate the student voices to increase, but my voice decreases over the course of the year. I want to make it where it's about 80-20, 80% student voice, 20% my voice. Why? Because students actually learn best when they use the language amongst each other in the classroom. If they're just getting all this information from me, it might look great. I could probably get through a good evaluation. Maybe I get the dumb stuff from my principal. But long term, students have less likely to remember all the things that we talked about if they only hear from me. But if they take notes, if they have anchor charts in the classroom, if they're talking with each other, if they're working in groups, heterogeneous groups where they have different skill sets, now all of a sudden they're activating different skills that's more related to who they are and learning from other skill sets from other students enriches the learning experience. This Z like zebra, where I zoom into the learning. This is what we call zooming in. This is looking at data. This is what's informing my teaching and instructional practice. This is what's helping me to know what students need, but also how do I support them? So if I'm teaching fourth grade, for example, and I got 20 students that's reading on grade level, and I got a student who's reading at first grade level, it's my duty to zoom in to see what skills that student has well, where is the student developing their skills, and then how do I intervene by having smaller group reading instruction with that student or students to build their reading skills up so that way they can make progress. And finally, the why is yielding towards achievement. We want to yield towards achievement. Um, I believe at the end of the day, as a teacher, I failed my students if we're less than 100% achievement at the end of a school year. Whether it's a universal screener, state assessment, all my students need to be able to showcase achievement. And what I mean by achievement is that if I'm teaching fourth grade, they've met all of the Massachusetts fourth grade standards for each of the subject areas, reading, writing, math, etc. And they're able to showcase that through multiple modalities. They can take an assessment and pass it. They could lead a presentation and be effective speakers during the presentation. They can go and do like a almost like a science fair like display and showcase their learning. They have a portfolio. I want to showcase multiple avenues in which students are able to showcase they've mastered the content area and that they're more than prepared for the next step. So that philosophy of dealing with crazy situations with crazy, if you will, this crazy framework helps to organize. I know it's like oxymoron, right? Organize the classroom to where everything that we do is intentional. Every move that we make is to further advance student learning. And every move that we make is to further along the achievement process. If a student walks into my room on day one, by day 180, with the implementation of the crazy framework and my prowess as a teacher, they should be able to walk away with at least a grade level, if not more than a grade level of achievement over the course of that year because they've been stretched and we're intrinsically building up students to take ownership of their learning. That's the goal. They become intrinsic motivators of their own learning.
We have a comment here in the chat from Mr. Frederick Cooper. I'll put it on the screen. He says, nice show.
Oh, thank you, Frederick. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So, can you tell us how did you cultivate resilience and collaboration in your classroom?
Oh, I got a good story for you on that. So, cultivating resilience. So, oh man, this was a few years ago. I just moved school districts. I went from Boston to Lexington. And they're totally different communities. Boston is, it's a urban school district. It's the largest school district in Massachusetts. It's, black, brown, you name it. It's what a lot of the metropolitan type of areas will look like. Great school district. I went to Lexington, which is a suburban school district. Um, Night and day. They got a lot of resources there, a lot of money to play with, smaller schools, all these different things. So it looks different. Um, but the teaching doesn't change, because as a black male educator, no matter who you put in front of me, those kids are going to get better. They're going to achieve. And that's data. Data says that. So, that's research. So anyway, I'm in my first full year in Lexington. And I decided, with my third graders, I was teaching third grade at the time. I said, you know what? We was practicing how to transition in the hallway.
Mhm.
These third graders learn how to walk in the hallway, get from, classroom to the cafeteria for lunch, all these different things. And I set this challenge. I asked if the kids wanted to do this challenge. They were like, yeah. This challenge was that they were going to learn how to transition themselves all throughout the school day. They was going to learn how to get from one place to another without teacher support all throughout the day. Now, that school year had 28 students, and it was let's say, it was not a peaceful class. It was certainly one with a lot of action going on. So this was going to be a challenge. But I said, you know what? Let's do it. So I trained them for about 3 weeks, giving them feedback, all these different things. And then at the third week, I'm talking about this cultivating resiliency. I said to them, like, all right, y'all, what we're going to do, change makers, is that we're going to now begin for you to transition yourself throughout the course of your school day. And they were excited, but they also knew the responsibility because we've been talking about this for 3 weeks. We've been building this up for 3 weeks. And man, these kids, they were doing it up right. I tell you, there was traffic going on in the hallways. They would stop, let another class pass by, all these different things like that. They were doing their thing. And then, they will transition themselves back to the room. And like it was like quiet as a mouse. They would get back in the room, get back to their seat, and start working on activities. If I had activities out for them to work on, whole nine, things were going well. It was so good even that a fifth grade class actually saw my third grade class transition themselves. They're like, yo, how come we don't get to do that? And the kids were like to them, we'll teach you. And they went up to that fifth grade class, taught the fifth graders how to do it. They started doing it. So the resiliency comes in when I got this email. Because, and there's always a little bit of like, resistance to this type of radical movement. I got this long, it was like that classic 11 o'clock email too. This the 11 o'clock email. This is right before you go to bed. You foolishly take the look at the email one last time, and there it is. And essentially said that, it is unwise for teachers to have their kids walk around the school building by themselves. And they gave all these lists about why you should not do this. So in cultivating that resiliency, we made a proposal about why what we're doing is actually appropriate for third grade students. We explained, me and the class, we explained that one, kids are actually starting to prepare for life. In life, you're not going to have somebody hold your hand and walk you from one place to another. You're going to learn that in middle school, for example, in just a couple of years, there is no teacher holding your hand to class. You better know how to get there. So we're teaching our upper elementary students up front how to prepare and how to get ready for an experience that won't surprise them when it's time to do it. They already know how to do it because they practice. Number two, this is where I got a lot of teachers on my side. I said, have you ever thought about why you don't have your full planning time? Like imagine if you had another 5 minutes of planning time every day. Do make some copies, maybe go to the bathroom, because as a teacher, going to the bathroom is a luxury item. You may not be able to go to the bathroom for 3 hours at a time. Actually, you just have that opportunity to go to the bathroom, or you're able to finish that conversation with a family that has a concern about a student learning. Now you have those few extra minutes to work on that. And I ran the numbers. I said, you can actually gain a whole school day's worth of planning time if we actually did this with third through fifth grade students. If you did this transition with kids, practice responsible transitions, we actually gain a day of planning time over the course of the year. Why would we not want to do that?
Right.
That turned a lot of people on to this idea of cultivating that type of resiliency where there was pushback, but then follow that pushback was, wait a minute, I have data and I have research to showcase my students are responsible when they transition. So there's no reason for them to stop. By the way, if you train your students how to do it, or if you have my class come to your class to teach them how to do it, you get a benefit as well because you get more playing time. So in cultivating resiliency and cultivating this idea of of perseverance and change making, if you will, there's always going to be some sort of resistance behind it. The idea is that when resistance takes place, we must be able to have the data, the evidence, and then the analysis as to why what we're doing is transformative and not be afraid of the resistance that come along with it. Now, before I pass it back to you, I want to give this caveat because I think it's important depending upon who's the listening audience. You might have teachers who might be in their first year and their second year, like, damn, that sounds like a really dope idea. I want to try that. I would caution people to also understand that seniority is important when we think about what cultivating resiliency is. And so there are levels to the game that we have to play in this political environment of education. A first year teacher needs to have or early career educator really needs to have the communal support to engage in these types of radical movements. Someone who is like brand new to trying something out like that when they haven't had their own classroom organized yet, is probably not a wise move to make. So I would say that, before just going right into it, like, yeah, I'm about to go do this, caution the listening viewer to know that there are levels to the game. And you have to know what is the levels of advocacy that I can do, but what is also the professional development I need to do in order to be first effective in my own classroom space before concerning myself with the outer environment. One of my principals once said to me, I don't want you involved in any sort of committee work until year 3. Your first 2 years need to be focused on how to be an effective teacher. And that's something I pass along to my teachers as well today. The first couple of years needs to be focused on your classroom and how to elevate your classroom to be a sanctuary of knowledge and wisdom, a sanctuary of conversation and of radical liberation, of freedom and joyful learning. Then, when you have the classrooms thing down, that's when you can start thinking about some of these other things that you might be try out to do. But we got to make sure the home base is cleared first. The Bible actually tells us you can't go out and do ministry out in the world if your home ain't set. So the home base got to be set first. And then we can start worrying about all this stuff afterwards.
Let me tell you, again, I have to say, again, this is another a fascinating moment here in education because, as I said, the educators that have been on the show before, everybody is doing something that's making a difference and an impact at the schools that they're at. Now, when it comes to that new district, are you still in that same district?
No, so after I became teacher of the year in 2024, my schedule, let's just say, got a little crazy. Um, to say the least, I was pulled out of the classroom almost every week and doing some sort of speaking engagement or some sort of guest appearance. My last 2 years of teaching, I missed 45 days each of those last 2 years. That's a lot of school days for a teacher to miss, especially when they're establishing their own brand and they're also elevating their voice now as a national figure when it comes to public speaking, keynote speaking, professional development, all these different things. They clash with each other. So I wasn't able to stay in Lexington mainly because I had to make that choice of it's time to elevate this impact work of cultivating change makers to another level. And rather than just focusing on the 25 in front of me, I can focus on the millions and the 25 in front of me when it comes to making sure that education and impact is met for every one of my students. So I had to do that tight shift, but that actually have led to me to make a greater impact as a result. Even if the seat shifted from being a classroom teacher to an educational advocate and an educational change maker, if you will. The seat shifted, the impact has continued.
So, what strategies help
Yeah.
you build interdependent learning communities?
So we could talk about that. We could talk about that in two ways. Um, interdependency interdependence is a term that you don't use as much as dependent or independent. And it's this middle ground that sometimes get lost. Interdependence means, in its kind of rawest form, that there is not this layer of like my hands being held by my teacher, but it's also that I'm not fully independent. I need guided practice. This is guided practice.
Mhm.
And guided practice incorporates teacher, students, and learner community. We have things like the teacher who is a resource, not the resource, a resource for students to use. Students are a resource for students to use because you can ask them questions, you can bounce ideas off each other, you can wrestle with ideas, agree, disagree, all these different things. Notes, anchor charts is also a resource that you can use because sometimes you're working on a math problem and like, I don't know what strategy I should use. Well, look at that anchor chart over there. You got 5 of them. You could select one that might be beneficial for you for this problem. And still, there's also this note taking element where we get to wrestle with ideas together in the big rug space and bounce off ideas, questions, answers, things like that. So, from an interdependency standpoint, it means that we're constantly guiding one another towards the destination, which is achievement. And rather it than being a teacher centric thing, it's a warm demander thing. The teacher and the students are all demanding excellence while also guiding with love towards excellence. And it's those moments right there for students and for classroom teachers as well that makes classrooms special. It makes teaching and learning special. Interdependence now as a founder of Cultivating Changemakers looks a little bit different. So now in my work today, I do a couple different things. One is that I help to create financial literacy curriculum and financial literacy content to students and to schools and to communities all around that's looking for knowledge and wisdom on financial literacy. I can't do this work by myself. I need guided direction. That guided direction is coalitions, it's advocacy groups, it's communal support with my team that helps to see different vantage points of academic learning in a way that is enriching and empowering while also being able to be a source of idea generation amongst each other. Interdependency in the educational business world is a coalition. When we all have the same mission, same goal, but we have different vantage points of how to reach those goals. So, for example, in Massachusetts, we are one of 10 states that does not have a state mandate financial literacy curriculum at this time. So students do not take financial literacy club courses as a required class in Massachusetts. And over 90% of our students are currently not accessing financial literacy.
Mm.
So that's a problem. That means that kids are graduating, never talking about money. They graduated, never talking about checking accounts, savings accounts, investments, entrepreneurship, and what does that mean from a financial standpoint? Those conversations are not being had. Part of that's because there hasn't been a requirement. So why teach it when there's no requirement? We got to focus on other things. But part of it is that our young folks are now going to college and now entering career, never talking about it. And as a result, they're getting their jobs, they're making paper, But then like I don't know what to do with this paper. I have no clue what to do with this paper. So, they mismanage it and they live check by check. When you have an economy that is almost 70% living check by check, 84% of Americans have about $1,000 in emergency savings. That's not good. That's an economical issue. And then when you talk about Massachusetts and you talk about how that's impacting all of our kids, that's not good. And when you hear that 90% of our stakeholders, our students, our parents, our workforce saying our kids need to learn about financial literacy, cultivating change makers and other coalitions have to do something about that interdependently. We have to work together to create legislation, to create law that says all of our children, including our Black and Brown children, are going to learn about financial literacy. They're going to learn the introductions of financial literacy in a semester long course. So they're prepared for how to manage money and how money is utilized in society. So that's like the kind of like work of how interdependence is working classroom wise, but then also business wise. It's all important.
Uh, So, what do you believe students need from educators today?
A lot. um, there's a lot of things that as a teacher that I want to make sure that I provide to my students. Can't say I do all these things well, but I will say that there's a lot of things that I want to be able to do for students. Number one, my last 2 years as a teacher, I didn't do, I think was one of the great cardinal sins of teaching is being present.
Mhm.
45 missed school days out of 180 school days is divided into 1/4. So you miss a fourth of your school year, guess what happens? Students grow up, students are gaining accomplishments, you're not there to celebrate. Rules, expectations, routines, structures, community, it's a little fractured. Why? Because you're in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out all the time. So there's no consistency. So right off the rip is presence. The teacher needs to be available every day with their students. They need to be available each day to listen, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to get angry when mistakes happen, lift up and build up our students. And we need to be able to be there so that way we could do those things. I think that's number one. Number two is I alluded to it already, is close listening. Even a student's silence speaks of big volumes. When a student is silent, listen to it because they're sharing something that's important for us to know. Especially, a student who's never silent, always talking, and suddenly the silent hits. We need to be listening and paying attention to the vibes each of our kids bring to the table. So being effective, present, I gotta be at work every day. Two, I need to be able to connect with my teachers or my students rather each day, checking in, handshakes in the morning, check-ins during the day, um, writing occasional letters, sending memos out to families of achievements and successes. And also if there's any concerns to be able to showcase that with families, which will be number three, is that you need to build an alliance, a partnership with families and even with the student. Sometimes we forget that students are actually part of this equation. They have a role to play. Students have a role. Their roles that they have to come to school to learn. So they have a role in this. We partner with families to make a streamlined expectation clear. What I do in my classroom every year is that for open house, we have like these contracts. It will be teacher, parent, student contracts. We come to an agreement what the learning goals are for the year. Everyone signs on it. And then everyone's held to the end of that contract. So when a student violates contract and they're not they're not performing well in the classroom, maybe they're being sent out a lot because of XYZ thing, what have you. You have a contract that says that your word says you was going to do this. Your actions is saying something different. This doesn't match with your word, with your signature, has to say. You can bring that up to families to keep that conversation going, but also reporting out the successes, the times that they've met those expectations, and celebrating those times with families as well. So being present, making sure that you're building strong connections with students and listening deeply to those connections, building an alliance, a partnership with families. And I'll say that the last one, in terms of being effective today, is that I've noticed probably in the last few years, and it might be because of my own personal growth, the teaching and learning goes beyond the four walls of the classroom. It's now, at least in my lens, is gone to larger spaces, even spaces that doesn't have those kids in it, like at the state house, and testifying that we need a right to read bill that's going to ensure that no longer will 27% of Black students are reading that grade level is sufficient. We're going to make sure that 100% of Black students are reading that grade level. Anything less than that is an injustice towards the law. The call of advocacy and speaking up for your students has shifted a lot over these last few years, where maybe part of it was just like I was developing as a teacher, so I didn't realize that that part is also important. But now I see it, and I'm like, okay, I also need to be able to fundamentally impact the way that students are represented in all spaces, which includes the State House, the coalition work that I do, which includes, how my higher ed work that I'm doing as a adjunct professor at Bay Path University. All of these spaces have those kids in mind. I'm just now bringing that all to other spaces beyond the four walls from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And that, I think, is what been the paradigm shift in me these last few years. It's the impact that teaching and learning is not just the classroom, it's everything else around it in those conditions to make it possible for joyful learning to take place.
Now, I want to tell you, I love those things, and what I would like if you could tell us,
Yeah.
this two-part question. With that contract, is that contract supposed to be an accountability situation that you guys not only talk over with the students, but also with the parents? If so, what has been the impact or the change in the education part of that?
Absolutely. So, for the first part of the question, the contract is a layer of accountability on all parts, including me. Now, I need to be called out on if I ain't doing my job. So, the contract puts everybody, all parties, at a position where they're responsible for their role of the equal support towards student learning, including the student, and also could be held accountable if coming below par when it comes to supporting the student. What I find in that work is that the impact of student learning is that students, when we talked about this in the very beginning, I told you about Mr. McLean, I was extrinsically motivated because of the expectations, but it was not internalized. The contract is designed to start off as an extrinsic tool to motivate students towards achievement.
Mhm,
Over the course of the year, it's designed to become an internal measurement of growth that the student takes ownership on.
mhm,
So students are tracking their own progress over the course of the year. They get to see through printouts of their data on their, end of unit assessment or on their reading scores and stuff like that. How well they did in the fall, how well they're doing right now in the winter, how well will they'll do in the spring. and they can track that growth. And and if remediation is needed, we come back together to adjust and to say how we could better, even further support our student if needed. And if they're meeting their goal, how do we continue to advance them towards the goal, or how do we even elevate them towards reaching the goal? And so the contract gives a layer of student accountability, teacher accountability, family accountability. It gives students an opportunity to measure their own success goals. And so that way they can take ownership of their learning. And it helps for students and teachers alike to be able to advocate for and with one another towards those learning goals. I think in any situation as a teacher, your goal is that you want students to continue to find great joy in learning and also become more and more accountable to their learning. If students feel that they're part of the learning experience and they're part of the journey towards the success, higher buy-in. When we incorporate their voice towards these goals and as part of the document, higher outputs. And here's the thing: when other students know what the learning goals are, so when they also know, like, man, your goal at the end of the year is that you're reading at a fourth grade level. Right now, you're reading at second grade level. They can also be part of that course correction or that redirection back to the pathway that they need to say, we're playing around right now. We got to get back to this work. Later on, when it's recess time, lunchtime, we can talk about it. But right now, we need to build our reading skills up. These are the ways that you go from a classroom that is functioning well to a classroom that's cultivating change makers.
So let's transition over to your Teacher of the Year and your professional recognition.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what did it mean to be named the 2024 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year?
Wow. It's Black History Month, and so I think the first thing that comes to mind immediately is that I get to share a page of Black history with people like the Honorable Thurgood Marshall. Um, I studied him when I was a kid, and to now be able to be on the same book as him in Black history, being the first Black male teacher ever in Massachusetts history to earn Teacher of the Year and all of the things that came along with it. It's great responsibility. Too much is given, much is required. So it's a high level of responsibility, but it was also a moment where like it was so surreal. Even to this day, I like, wow, it's really catapulted me to a whole nother level as an educator. I guess the quick backstory before like finishing up this answer is I went through a whole school year applying for becoming Teacher of the Year. Well, I was nominated actually to be Teacher of the Year. Had to go through an application process, had to submit videos and do interviews and be observed and all these different things. Ironically enough, I found out I became Teacher of the Year July 21st, 2023 at Vanderbilt University. I was actually in the library. Can't make this stuff up. I was in the library and I fell asleep. And my phone rang, and I was thinking, like, oh snap, it's 4 o'clock. I'm about to be late for class.
Mhm.
And then I look at my phone and I'm like, oh, it's only 1:30. Okay, cool. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Um, I need to actually respond to this phone call because someone left a message and said to call them back about next steps of being Teacher of the Year. And to that point, I was like, damn, I already did like 5 different things that they want me to do as teacher. What else they want me to do? I met with the commissioner on this, that. Like, what else do you want me to do? So I called back and they were like, first thing they said was, I want to be the first to tell you congratulations. You are the 2024 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. Don't tell anybody about this. I don't remember the rest of that conversation. I remember going to class that evening. I was like, yo, guess what happened? I was Teacher of the Year, y'all. And, everyone celebrating. We all went out that night. It was crazy. But I was not supposed to tell anybody between that day and the announcement day, which was not until November 2023. So I was sitting on this knowledge that I knew for 3.5 months. During the 3.5 months, I was doing a lot of praying, a lot of meditating, a lot of listening because I was unsure how prepared I was for this moment. And I didn't know what the responsibilities was really going to require because you hear the stories as one thing, but I haven't lived it. So I don't know what I'm about to go into. I'm about to go into a wilderness situation. I'm about to go into a new land flowing with milk and honey. I don't know what I'm about to go into. I do know that is a prestige recognition, but to the extent of how prestige it is and what I know about it, I'm unsure. But I'll tell you, that weekend of November 3rd was crazy. I was like top 10 most searched on Google that weekend. It was nuts. Like I was like having myself a blast. I was searching myself and seeing all these articles, all these things, all these videos and stuff like, wow, this is crazy. But I think after, the initial excitement settled down, having a message that resonates is so essential to longevity of an effective position and role as teacher of the year. So when I first started, I was known for restorative circles, restorative justice, healing work, and things like that. That was what really was my thing. Now it's shifted to financial literacy, which is a big shift from where we initially were. Still cultivating change makers, just in a whole different light from what it originally was set out to be. And I would say the responsibility of Teacher of the Year required a lot of listening to my fellow teachers, my fellow colleagues, because there's so much hurt, so much disapproval, concern about teaching. Our kids are graduating and they're not readers. They're graduating and they're not prepared for the demands of life. I was reading some statistics earlier that here in Massachusetts, 2025, only 27% of Black third grade students are reading on grade level, 22% Latino students at third grade reading on grade level, 14% students with disabilities reading on grade level. It struck a chord to me that there's a lot of needs out here. And I have a platform and I have to use it responsibly to address these matters. My grandmother at 2 years old blessed me with a book, taught me how to read. Now, as Teacher of the Year, I get to bless nations with the power of reading and the joyfulness of reading, and why reading is such an important tool for all of our kids to be able to access and to read. And if we're leaving behind millions of children to not have that skill, that doesn't sit right with me. I have to advance that forward. And Teacher of the Year helped to create that platform necessary to advance forward that messaging, that responsibility as an advocate. All the things we talked about throughout this entire podcast really started to come here as Teacher of the Year. The advocacy work, the intrinsic motivation, the listening, the connection, all the things we covered all the way up to this point. Being Teacher of the Year now said it's time to put it into action. And that's what we're doing.
So let's go down to your curriculum development and policy advocacy. So, can you tell us with the organization that you have created and the work
Mhm.
that you do? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the story about cultivating change makers is, we actually started off as a LLC that could receive honorariums for keynote speaking. Because as teacher of the year, Deshaun Washington wasn't able to at the time. Now, Dr. Deshaun Washington wasn't able to at the time, but the LLC could because it was under my name. So that
Mhm.
was like a little slick way to get some income flow through. Now it's actually operating predominantly on financial literacy, but also in other modes of education. So when I was a fourth grade teacher, my students, they wanted to learn about financial literacy. And I had the perfect person who could come to my classroom to teach financial literacy. And he would come to my class every year and he'll lead instructions. We'll do activities with him. Phenomenal, phenomenal. Kids were glowing. I'm talking about like learning about all these things, checking accounts, savings accounts, investments, all that. Fourth graders, excited. And as I sat back and observed the joy that was happening in that moment, I looked across the pod and realized that there was another 100 kids that were never going to learn about this financial literacy that we're talking about. That didn't sit right with me. But beyond that, I realized, oh, wow, there's millions of children that's never learned about financial literacy in their schooling around the United States. So cultivating change makers began to shift their focus on financial literacy and being able to teach financial literacy. Now, the work we talked about a little bit earlier, more sense as high school, but what about elementary school students and middle school students? One way that we've been doing this work on financial literacy and providing curriculum is we're writing children's books. We have three that's published. One is called CC's Money Seeds, which teaches young children about needs and wants. We have another book called CC Waters a Jar, which talks us about, how to spend, how to save, how to give money, things like that. And we have another book called CC's Classroom Budget, which focuses a lot on this idea of how to budget funds. Why do young kids need to know this stuff? Well, young children actually should know this because as early as 4 years old, research shows kids are already forming an opinion about money. They hear conversations from their family, good, bad, and different. They form a relationship with it. Maybe they go to the bank and put money in a little piggy jar, or maybe they don't do that at all. But there's some relationship that they're starting to form with money. So actually, kids as early as 4 years old are actually prepared to have discussions, to read about and study financial literacy. So we want to help to curb that by providing young children with books that talk about financial literacy, for families to read with their kids about financial literacy. Why? Because financial literacy is literacy. It's reading, it's writing, it's speaking, it's listening. And our work at Cultivating Changemakers help to elevate the understanding of how financial literacy works and how to apply it in life application. And this way, our children are able to take books like this, see a protagonist like Cece here, our main character in all the books, see a child that looks like them, and be able to be taught by a child that looks like her all about money, financial literacy, and connect with her in that sort of way. And that is the power of what Cultivating Change Makers is all about. We're
So,
trying to, yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
no, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, 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 no. I was just gonna say that's the power of what our work is to do, is that we're addressing a need and we're solving it through the lens of reading, and we're also partnering with other organizations that's leading that we're going to help to lead instruction on financial literacy in the next few weeks in the city of Cambridge in Massachusetts. That's going to focus on teaching 14 to 17-year-olds all about financial literacy as well. So we're doing this work in different pockets, all with the idea of addressing a need that's so needed for our students, and that is to learn about the concept of literacy and how it works as well.
So, can you tell us what inspired you to create the financial literacy curriculum rooted in social justice?
So the rooted part of social justice has to do with this idea of access, right?
Okay.
Less than a half of 1%, so less than 0.0005% of books, children's books, focuses on financial literacy with a Black protagonist in it. So, number one, we're creating financial literacy texts with Black children as the protagonist. Shifts the paradigm of who gets to have access to learn about financial literacy. It shifts the mindset about when do we talk about money? Because Cece is ready to talk about money, and she's a young girl. And actually, in the children's books, one thing to know is that Cece actually gets older with each book. So she starts off in kindergarten and actually gets older through the books. So she takes what she learned in previous books and applies it to future books while also learning new things as well with her friends and family. So that's one way. Number two is when we think about social justice, there's a legislative component that goes along with this work as well. While making children's books is so great and so awesome, it's one avenue. Another avenue is creating law and making sure law gets put in place. And so, we've been writing, Cultivating Changemakers has been writing and supporting financial literacy bills along with other coalitions in the state of Massachusetts that's going to say students will take a semester long financial literacy course in high school. Why is this important for social justice? Because we're putting into law action that needs to be put out by school districts to make sure that our children are getting access to books like these and being able to utilize these books to be able to teach financial literacy. So that's number two. Third and final thing is that as part of social justice and the social justice movement, it's very important for us to also be able to be action oriented with the implementation aspect of teaching financial literacy. Our upcoming work with the a after school program in the city of Cambridge in Massachusetts is centering this idea of taking the theoretical elements of financial literacy and putting it into practice. And we talked about this earlier, that there's a practical application with all of this. Our students who are coming into this program, 14 to 17 years old, are earning an internship. So they actually get paid every week to take this course for 12 weeks.
Oh, wow.
During that time, yeah, it's cool. And during that time, we're actually applying the skills of budgeting, reading our pay stubs, understanding how taxes work, all these different things. We're applying it to the actual income that these students are going to get. We're budgeting all these different things, right? Why is that important? Because most people don't learn how to do these budgets until they're way older in life. They're getting a skill at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old of how to take real money that they actually get in their bank account, real money, and being able to budget how every dollar is moving in their account. And we're targeting specifically Black and Latino students for this program. These students that are going to come in, or these youth, I should say, that's coming into the space, are going to get that firsthand practical application of utilizing the skills of financial literacy in their own lives with their own real earned internship money. So when we do all this, there's an element of creating long-term text like CC's Money Seeds. There's the legislation piece. I got to advocate for you with law and legislation. And then there's this other element, putting the word into practice. That's what we're called to do now.
There's a comment here in the chat from Dr. Whitty. I put it on the screen. He says, awesome. Financial literacy must be brought back into elementary, middle, and high school curriculum.
Agreed, Dr. Whitty. And yes, I think that financial literacy is something that really kids in kindergarten all the way up should be having every year. Even if you only have 6 lessons a year covering this topic, and then it expands in high school, can you just imagine the impact that that's going to make to our young kids to understand money and understand how money works and how to leverage money as a vessel towards purpose rather than just an object that's used to exchange services and goods? Man, that would be so crazy if we were able to do that.
And so we opened the show with our Black History reflection. When you and I discussed, Black history and influences, and I asked you who was the most influential person in your life and career, you said it was Dr. Charles Hamilton Houston. Can you tell us why is he the most influential figure in your life and career?
Well, I mean, this brings us back to your initial opening take.
Mhm.
So, the Honorable Thurgood Marshall, Supreme Court Justice, NCAA, excuse me, NAACP extraordinaire, phenomenal when it came to the understanding of the law. But someone had to teach him, and Charles Hamilton Houston at Howard University is an unsung hero that when you think about civil rights movements and you think about even the dethroning of the Jim Crow era, his name doesn't really get talked about as much, probably because he died, right when the civil rights movement was getting started. So he doesn't really get the notoriety as you would say. But he trained up so many black attorneys to defend the law, to understand the law, how to win cases, how to prepare the flock to go out onto the earth and to plant seeds among nations of justice. So he did a lot of that background work that sometimes doesn't get recognized a lot. And we celebrate brothers, like the Honorable Thurgood Marshall, as we should, because of what his monumental impact was, first black man ever to hold Supreme Court seat. And as a matter of fact, has been held by a black man that same seat since 1969. So it's been held 67 rather. So it's been held since 1967. People don't really realize that that seat has been held by a black man since 1967, all the way up to today. But I think there's this element that someone like the Honorable Charles Hamilton Houston just gets lost in the shuffle because he was the teacher, he was the mastermind behind, but wasn't necessarily forward facing. But if you study him, you study the work he did in the 1930s and the 1940s and preparing these attorneys to do the civil rights movement and be the dethroner, if you will, of Jim Crow and launching civil rights. You would say that like, yeah, he's a monumental figure. He helped plant the seed for the Honorable Thurgood Marshall to be who he is today, revered as a phenomenal advocate of black folks and representing black excellence at the highest level when we talk about defending and advocating for justice. But he did a lot of that seed planting work. And I think of him like I think of teachers. There's a lot of great teachers that's going to impact greatness out of their students, and some of them become great individuals that we study about. But behind all those great figures, there were great teachers, many of whom go unnamed because we never talk about them. Many of whom go unseen because we don't have any discussions about who they are or who they're going to become. But those people, those teachers, those mentors, those coaches, whatever phrase you want to use, adjectives you want to use to describe them, they were the quintessential element of what helped to make that person be effective in their work for social justice and academic excellence, all those good things. And so Charles Hamilton Houston is the perfect figure to end a conversation about full circle moments, because he is the seed planter that elevated people like the Honorable Thurgood Marshall to the seat that he has today, as a justice person and a long life figure of the Supreme Court that's now revered and regarded long beyond his years. But he was the one that set that up. And yeah, I think that's just like a perfect way to kind of like wrapping that.
So, final question for you. How
Hmm.
does Houston's legacy shape your approach to educational justice?
Well, you think about someone like Charles Hamilton Houston, his legacy helped to shape how preparation takes place. He's not the star of the show necessarily. He's not the top five names that you hear anybody mention, like, oh, who's my favorite, Black history figure? His name doesn't come up. You probably ask 100 people. Probably a lot of them don't even know who he is, being upfront with you on that. So he's not an immediate image. And I think for me, I wasn't necessarily an immediate image when I thought about what an effective teacher looks like, because I struggled so much in the beginning of my career. And I needed mentoring and guidance to become effective. Then I needed, after that, opportunities to find my voice, to now have my own impact of a Charles Hamilton Houston today, supporting teachers of tomorrow. So when I think about that work of how he impacted me as an educator, is the teaching of the teacher. Charles Hamilton Houston was the exemplary professor of how to activate law into justice. For me, it was how to activate strong teaching to a wave of new teachers who'll be able to apply that into their own learning space. And I think that's um, how that impact is left behind.
So, in closing, what is the words of wisdom and encouragement you'd like to leave for our audience? How they can connect with you via your social media, your website, your books, to purchase your books, all of that good nature, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. So first, you are the greatest. You, whoever is listening, watching, you're the greatest blessing in the world. You are uniquely made to do something uniquely that no one else is able to do. I can't do what Brother King is called to do in leading this podcast. Nor is he called to do what I'm called to do, which is find and cultivating change makers. But we both have a unique gift. And when we recognize our gifts early and we know what our gifts are, it allows for us to then step forward with authority and speak boldly towards our call of action. I will leave my audience with knowing that you are special, and you have to find, if you don't know what that talent and gift is, we got to go ask some people what those talents and gifts are, because you have something that no one else is able to do but you. And when you realize that you are that special, that no one else could do that one thing that you're called to do, man, that's just like a jubilant move. I almost want to get up and start dancing. It feels so good to hear that. You can catch me on LinkedIn. You can put in my name, Deshaun C. Washington, EDD, Doctor. You'll be able to catch me on LinkedIn, Blue Sky. You can find me on Blue Sky there, YouTube. You can put in Cultivating Change Makers. You can find my 3 books, CC's Money Seeds, CC Waters a Jar, and CC's Classroom Budget, all on Amazon, all available to purchase. They're only about, $9.99, or $10. $10. I mean, that's the greatest investments to invest in some reading, especially if you have a kid who loves reading, or even a kid that may not love reading, but they see CC and like, you know what, that's a kid that looks like me. I'm gonna go check that book out. We have a website, cultivatingchangemakersllc.org. You can go check us out and see all the cool things that we're doing right now. We're revamping our page. So be on the lookout in the next month or so. Our page is going to be lit up with all types of new goodies, all types of new activities, newsletters, all those different things. Stay tuned because you're going to have yourself a really good experience going onto the website. And finally, we're just getting started, so stay tuned because over these next, few months, we're gonna be taking it over. So continue to follow me directly, follow Cultivating Changemakers. Um, be ready because we're about to do something very special, and you definitely want to be in tune to see what we're doing at the legislative level, at the practical level, at the creating more books. We got 3 more children's books coming out in the next 3 months. So stay tuned. We'll have a total of 6 by the summertime. Look, y'all just stay tuned, okay?
Well, before I close out, I want to tell you, I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate you sharing this valued information about education and your journey because it's very impactful, not just for our audience here, but this is for students that's abroad. Everyone can learn from what you just taught us tonight. I would also like to say to everyone that is watching on all of our channels, if you have not yet subscribed, especially to our YouTube channels, I would appreciate it if you would go to the channel, subscribe, enable all notifications, and you're able to catch all the shows live when they go live. Or you can also go back and check out all the previous shows that are on the site, and you get to learn the educational purposes that they have all left for you guys to remember. So, just in closing, I just want to say this to the audience as well as to you, Deshaun. Um, Tonight's conversation reminds us that education is not simply a profession, it's a calling. Dr. Deshaun C. Washington stands in the tradition of those who understood that teaching is an act of liberation, advocacy is an act of courage, and curriculum is an act of power. His work challenges us to imagine classrooms where every child is seen, valued, and equipped to shape their own future. It challenges us to build systems that honor potential rather than limit it. And it challenges us to remember that public education is one of the greatest tools we have for strengthening democracy. As we close, let us carry forward the spirit of Thurgood Marshall and the brilliance of Charles Hamilton Houston and the unwavering commitment of education like Dr. Washington. The work continues, and so does the movement. Good night, family. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay empowered. You all have a great evening. We will see you tomorrow for another great show on America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King.